A double-sided t-shirt quilt is not for the faint of heart. They're difficult and can be tricky, but I'm going to show you what to do each step of the way. I didn't make my first double-sided t-shirt quilt until I'd been making t-shirt quilts for over 23 years. I would suggest you not try one until you have more experience with the others. A double-sided t-shirt quilt is a physical endeavor. You have to be able to work on the floor, lift and maneuver the quilt. The larger the quilt, the more physically challenging it will be. I'll be referring to information that's available in our standard t-shirt quilt video series. If you have not watched our basic series, I suggest you do so. Both the front and the back of your double-sided t-shirt quilt need to be the same size. If you don't have enough to make both the same size, I would suggest that you make the back the same size as the front by using fillers. I would suggest that you actually don't mirror image both sides, because then you have to match the quilting up on the front and the back exactly, and that will be very difficult to do. The back side of your quilt should not have anything on it that you would have to trace around. For example, a neckline and a pocket are bad. Also, make sure there's no bling on the back side of the quilt. This is because when you're quilting your quilt, you cannot see the back and can't anticipate those. When you make your double-sided t-shirt quilt, make sure that you use a light-colored temporary binding. This is because we will be marking on this tick marks to show where our 4-inch grid will be. So you're going to need a ruler and a Sharpie. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a line on the temporary binding from the quilt out. Where the seams meet the temporary binding, this is going to be easy. But where there's no temporary binding, we still want to put it on the 4-inch grid. So when the block is divisible by 8, you can actually just fold it to find your center. So I'm going to line up my 2 lines, grab my pin, mark it, and then I can open up and mark it the whole way. So for example, I have a 16-inch block here. I know that if I fold it in half, I'll get to 8 inches. Again, I line up my marks, and I put a new mark in. There's the center. Now I can take the center mark and this edge mark and line them up. And I can mark. So continue marking along the top of your quilt and then start working on your side. When you have a 12-inch block, you don't have the ability to fold it in half and find that 8. So on my side, I'm going to mark the intersections. And then I'm going to take my ruler. I'm going to line it up. And actually this one matches up really well. So there's 4 and 8. So continue marking around the entire perimeter of both quilts, the front quilt and the back quilt. Your next step is to find the center of your quilt. Line your corners up, find the center. I like to actually take my scissors to mark the center with a little clip. Do that on the bottom, and then you're going to do that on the back quilt also. After you clip both the front quilt and the back quilt, then you need to find the center of your batting. When you have the center, I take my scissors and I also clip the center of the backing, top and bottom. Now find a large workspace that's clean that you can lay your quilt out on. This is the back of our quilt. So you want to lay your quilt so the good side faces your work surface. Next, grab your batting and you're going to spread that out over this bottom quilt. So now I'm going to line my top of my batting up perfectly with the top center of my quilt. Next, grab your quilt front. You don't have to have the entire quilt perfectly lined up at this point, just the top center. Next, grab some safety pins. We're going to safety pin the top, the bottom, and the batting together. When I safety pin, I am very, very meticulous about how I safety pin because I want to line this grid on the front up with the grid on the back. I'm going to use my safety pin. I'm going to go down on my line as close to the quilt top as possible. And then I'm going to look at my back and I'm going to push my pin up on the line very carefully. So now my pin is in. It goes perfectly on that line, front and back. That's your first pin. Now we have to pin around the entire quilt. Once you've pinned across the top, then you need to shake out your work. You're trying to watch for lumps in your backing, lumps in the batting, lumps in the top. Then you're going to work down the sides. I go one side, other side, back and forth all the way down. About every 3 to 4 pins, I'll shake the quilt out again to make sure everything is lying flat. When you get to the bottom of your quilt, we need to start at the center and then work out. We go out 1 pin at a time. That way it lays very smooth and flat. Then we'll cut off the excess batting. After you finish pinning your quilt, it's time to move it to the long arm machine. I can't emphasize enough how important this step is. If you fail to do this step, you could have a mess when it comes to long arm quilting. Once you have your quilt pinned together, the front and the back, it's time to put it on the long arm quilting machine. So we're going to start by putting it on the upper bar first, the take-up bar. So I'm going to lay my quilt over here. I'm going to make sure that my front of my quilt is up. Find my center and pin it to the center of my take-up lead. I'm pinning every 4 inches. Once you have your top pinned on the take-up lead, then you're going to roll it on. Next, I'm going to pin my bottom onto my top lead. Find the center and line it up with the 0. Again, I'm pinning every 4 inches. Once you finish pinning it on the bottom, then we're going to roll it back all onto this bottom bar. Once you have your double-sided quilt on both take-up bars, now we have to go underneath. What we're trying to do when we go underneath is to make sure that both layers of this quilt are together and level. Right now, underneath, it's really sagging and it's not going to line up, and if you were to start quilting, you'd have a mess. So let's go under and see what's happening. See how baggy the back is right now? We need to get this nice and flat. So first I'm going to roll up that leader bar. Now that's rolled up. It's still baggy, so I need to tighten my top a little bit. So I'm going to work my hands from underneath and I'm going to push. You have to play with it. It takes a while. Let's go look and see what it looks like up on top. I'm feeling underneath right now, and I have a seam underneath that goes along here, and I have a seam on top. So I want to make sure that they're lined up on top of each other. Now I'm ready to quilt. When I quilt a double-sided quilt, I only quilt in patterns. I don't quilt in any tracings, because if I do, you won't see them on the back. I'm just going to do a simple pattern on this shirt, and then I'm going to go back underneath and check out and see how I did. Now that I've finished quilting this first block, I'm going to go back underneath and take a look at it. It looks really great underneath there. And I'm not too floppy, and I think it's good to keep going. I'm ready to keep on quilting. I'm going to figure out which blocks I can quilt and then to go on. I know that I can't get to the bottom of this block, so I'm going to quilt these blocks right there, and then I'm going to roll it forward. Once you advance your quilt, go back underneath and check your work. Look for drooping fabric. If the fabric's drooping, you're going to tuck it back in so you can continue quilting. The further you progress on your quilt, the less issue you'll have with the back. And when you get down to the end, you should be able to feel the back of the front quilt and the front of the back quilt lined up on top of each other. If you did that, you're golden.